Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of League Chat with the Stat. Thank you again for joining me on another special week this week. It's your man Stat, and what a grand final we had between the Melbourne Storm and the Penrith Panthers, with it being unfortunately the last game of the season. Now, let's get straight into it. The Melbourne Storm defeating the Penrith Panthers 26 points to 20, and it was a very interesting grand final to say the least, between all the other grand finals that have been had in the last few years. Now, first things first, I just wanted to discuss the Melbourne Storm. I thought when the opportunities came across them, they just took them straight away. They didn't waste any time. You could tell how really focused they were, and with that experience of Cameron Smith hanging there at hooker, and with Munster and Hughes running the show there, you could tell how disciplined they were and experienced they were, and they were ready for the occasion. Now, with that being said, obviously it didn't seem like that in the first minute. Melbourne Storm getting the ball and knocking it on in the first tackle, which presented a perfect opportunity for the Panthers to score. And when I watched that first set and I saw how sloppy Panthers were in attack, I knew they were going to lose that game. It just looked a bit disorganised. I don't think they were expecting to get the ball that early. They didn't seem to be prepared to take on the line that quick into the game. And I definitely thought that, with that being said, they just looked a little shell-shocked. And it took, a couple of sets on their line, on the Melbourne Storm line, for them to do nothing with it, for them Melbourne to go score a penalty try. And look, going to call it how it is, I didn't think that was a try. I think it was a tough call to call it a penalty try. Now with Tyrone May's foot coming across the line, there was obviously there was intention to stop the try, but I don't believe it was a big enough call in a grand final to have awarded a penalty try. Obviously, it wouldn't have helped the Panthers in the start of that game. And look, with that, Melbourne Storm ran out to 26-0 at halftime. Sorry, 20-0 halftime, and then going with it within the second half, 26-0. But the Panthers were very sloppy as well. I feel like they saved their worst game for last. When you watch that game, you don't think that they would have scored and won 17 games in a row with the season they had, which is, again, a phenomenal season they've had. But in the game that it counted the most, the Panthers didn't deliver. And they decided to deliver within the last 15 minutes of that game. They started to really show that the errors weren't going to disrupt their game plan. In that last 15 minutes, they scored 3 tries. And they were looking a threat to score in the last minute of the grand final. But with that being said, I thought some of the calls were disgusting in that game. Ashley Klein didn't do a good job at refereeing that game. As I've mentioned already, the penalty try, but also the try to Brian To'o in that second half. Now, it was the first try for the Panthers, and it got them back into the game, but you could easily see, it was very obvious that Isaiah Yeo created a massive shepherd to put in that kick. He put in that kick not because it was planned. The guy's a lock. He doesn't kick the ball every day. He put in that kick because he knew it was in the wrong. It just happened to be a phenomenal kick and worked out well for Brian To'o to go score in the corner. But that should not have been a try. These are basic rules that we try to review in the season. So when it comes to finals and grand final, we're going to have blunders. Yeah, I felt like the most blunders we had was in the grand final with that penalty try and that try that Panthers got. I didn't think it was good. As I said, Melbourne were way too good. Ryan Papenhuyzen is going to be the face of the game. If he isn't already, for the younger kids, he's going to be a genuine face of the game in the years to come. I thought his performance was bar none. You got to remember, his first year in first grade since taking over Billy Slater's jersey. And I thought this whole year has been superb, but the game where it counted the most, he really tore the Panthers apart. Now, that play where off the scrum where he ran 65, 70 metres and scored that try, which should have won the game for Melbourne without that late fireback from Penrith, it just showed how much he's grown within the year. A lot of disruptions for Melbourne Storm as well. You've got to consider that they were playing out of Melbourne and then had to relocate to the Sunshine Coast. With COVID-19 shutting down all of Victoria, they had to relocate to the Sunshine Coast. And with any other team, I genuinely believe with any other team, it would have disrupted their season. They wouldn't be able to continue that mojo that Melbourne were rolling with. And they ended up finishing off at the Sunshine Coast being unbeaten in that stadium. And you just see how the bond they've created amongst the players, how that togetherness and how experienced they've been, playing together no matter where they were playing. That professionalism as well, led by Craig Bellamy and Cameron Smith, brought the best out of Ryan Papenhuyzen. And obviously being on the phone to Billy Slater every day, trying to get tips and tricks to be better, really showed in that grand final. He ran for 210 metres, took 20 runs, scored a try, line break assist, and even that line break to score. But the play that I saw that he's done before, but he did it again in the grand final, was when Penrith got a penalty. And when Penrith went to kick that ball out, Ryan Papenhuyzen jumped from inside the field of play over the touchline to bat the ball back in. And again, it was a heroic performance from him. And in that moment, he had torn his calf. He had done a calf injury at that moment. But he continued to play on and did his part for the Melbourne Storm to win the game and to get one over the Panthers and to claim the premiership and to be known as the 2020 winners. Now, for the Penrith Panthers, James Fisher-Harris was the one that stood out the most. 18 runs, 140 metres with a tackle break and 33 tackles. With Christian Welch, 16 runs, 132 metres, a tackle break, an offload, and 42 tackles for the Melbourne Storm there. The two forwards being the standouts in that game. But I also did see that defensively, both teams did get busy. It was very clear to note that, Apisai Coruscant finishing the game with 51 tackles in a busy game for other players such as Cleary, who played a little bit rough at times. That ball he threw to Vunivalu, it's paid off in the season. It just didn't pay off in the grand final, unfortunately. But it just showed, in that game, that the Melbourne Storm were way too experienced, way too dominant. But in that last 15 minutes to have allowed the Penrith Panthers to come back into the game, I thought it was a little bit how's it going? The two sin bins didn't help. The first sin bin was controversial in itself, but that second sin bin didn't need to be done. And look, in that moment, Cameron Smith going up to the ref and saying, I know you're trying to give the game an exciting finish, I would have gone and sin binned him then as well. Yeah, it wasn't the right call. Yes, I wouldn't have gone and put the sin bin there, but with Cameron Smith walking up to the ref and arcing up and saying, oh, you just want to have an entertaining finish and an exciting finish, if I was Ashley Klein, I definitely would have sin binned him too. Like, you know what? I don't need those remarks, you can go too. I thought it was just lousy from Cameron Smith, which could have potentially been his last game for his career. But look, as I said, the Storm were dominant. They dominated in the most of the areas of the game by that last 15 minutes, and the Panthers left it too little too late. Now, we're going to get on to news around the NRL world. And former St. George Illawarra 5'8" Gareth Widdop is looking to be released on compassionate grounds from being overseas. Now, he got released from the Dragons on compassionate grounds to head to England, but now he's getting released from compassionate grounds from England to head back to Australia. While he keeps denying it, there is still a lot of things happening in the background with their coach in Steve Price to obviously get that all negotiated and found out. Now, there are a lot of clubs that have been linked already. You've got the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, the Brisbane Broncos, the Newcastle Knights, the West Tigers, and the North Queensland Cowboys. All looking for a half anyway to bolster their depth in the halves, and they look at Gareth Widdop as a genuine one to do that. Now, the Sydney Roosters have come out as favourites to sign Joseph Suaalii from the South Sydney Rabbitohs. He's been talked about a lot on this podcast over the last few months. The highly sought 17-year-old who is talked as the next big thing in the NRL. He's very talented, can play union, and is looking to try his hand in the Olympics as well. The Sydney Roosters have accommodated a few players to make that happen. With Kyle Flanagan being released and Pawasa Famawasili also being released from the Roosters. Famawasili taking a 2-year contract with the St. George Illawarra Dragons, and Kyle Flanagan, who I thought was the unlucky man to have been released, notching up a 3-year deal with the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. So that's where they're getting the funds from to get Joseph Suaalii, and they're looking to sign him and get the Rebels to release him a year early from his contract. Now, the Bulldogs have been linked to more Penrith players and not just Matt Burton, but they've also been linked to getting their centre Stephen Crichton and their lock Isaiah Yeo for season 2022. Now, it's been made very clear that Stephen Crichton wants to stay on past 2021 with the Penrith Panthers, and they're looking at tabling him a contract of $1.5 million for 3 years, which would be $500,000 a season. Now, Trent Barrett is well aware of the Penrith salary cap situation, obviously having come from the club to be head coach of the Bulldogs for next year. So he's targeting the right players to build the club around, and he looks at those two as other potential targets to build the club. Now, we just brought in the hottest rumour of the week, Mitchell Pearce back to the Sydney Roosters. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the future of Mitchell Pearce. With being said, he has been having issues with the Newcastle Knights in negotiating a decent contract. Now, the Knights have told him he'll need to take a pay cut of up to $400,000 to stick on. Now, it's not something that he would want to do, being on $1 million a season, which has also given the rumour that the Roosters would come around and offer him a decent contract to come back to the club and to mentor the young halves in Lachlan Lamb and Sam Walker. Now, as I said, we are unsure how much truth there is to that, but it is the hottest rumour of the week, with Mitchell Pearce being sounded out by the Sydney Roosters to head there back in 2021. Now, the Penrith Panthers have announced that the following players will no longer be at the club: James Tarmo, who signed a 2-year contract with the West Tigers; Jack Hetherington, who signed a 2-year contract with the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs; Caleb Aikens, who signed a 1-year deal with the Canberra Raiders, all being moved on, as well as Malachi Watene-Zelezniak, Pat Hollis, and Braden McGrady, all being released and being without contracts for 2021. Now, back onto the Bulldogs. Their former captain back in the day, the Premiership winner, Steve Price, has been sacked from the Bulldogs board just after 12 months of being there. Trent Barrett has underdone some massive changes there and has told Steve Price that his time is up at the club. And in saying that, they have signed the former World Cup winner, Steve Hansen, as a high-performance consultant to the club. Now, you guys know of Steve Hansen. He won a World Cup with the All Blacks back in 2003, I believe, and has played a hand in a few NRL teams as well as most rugby union clubs. So he will be joining the Bulldogs as a high-performance consultant, and he will be looking to offer advice where he can to the club with their recruits, and be working with everyone from the board to the players. So it's a huge signing for the Bulldogs, and starting to see that Trent Barrett is making some serious changes to turn the club around from finishing 15th and to having all those board issues. He's starting to look to make them a genuine contender again, which is good to see. Now, Des Hasler has looked to sign a contract extension with the Manly Sea Eagles for 2 years. Yet to be announced, but that should be announced in the next few weeks or so. James Graham, the former Canterbury Bankstown Bulldog and St. George Illawarra Dragon, who has gone back to the Super League, has announced his retirement for the game, having played over 400 games in the Super League and then coming down under to the NRL for the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs and the St. George Illawarra Dragons. My congratulations to you, James Graham, on a wonderful career, and all the best in retirement and what the future holds for you in England. Now, Bryce Cartwright. Now, we mentioned a little while ago he had been released by the Gold Coast Titans and without a home for 2021. Can say that he, without having pen being put to paper as of yet, I believe that he'll be signing a 1-year deal with the Parramatta Eels on a minimum wage contract. This means that his contract will go from about $450,000 to about $100,000 on a 1-year deal. With that contract, he will be guaranteed a spot in the top 30 squad for 2021. And as I said, Brad Arthur's a big fan of having someone like Bryce Cartwright in the side to be able to deliver on that potential that he's had. And without the big money there, it should be able to be easier for him to play some free-flowing football. Now, Dave Donaghy, the Storm CEO, has resigned from the Melbourne Storm effective immediately. This just means that he'll be looking to take over the gig over at the Brisbane Broncos come January, when Paul White removes himself as the Chief Executive Officer. Now, Dave Donaghy will come in and will make the Brisbane club look to make it great again, and by looking to bring in Craig Bellamy and even as a long shot Cameron Smith to the club to bring back success and sustainability to the club. Now, Benji Marshall, who wasn't offered a contract beyond this season with any club, will be looking to sign a 1-year deal with the North Queensland Cowboys. The deal is roughly going to be $150,000 for the next year. Now, Todd Payton, with the new Cowboys coach there, is obviously good mates with Benji Marshall, having won the comp together in 2005, and which will mean that it could mean that Jake Clifford, the half over at Cowboys, is looking to move on and looking to sign with the Newcastle Knights. And the last one for the week will be John Asiata, who had been linked to a few clubs, is not willing to head to Sydney and wants to stay in Queensland. And he has made his interest known to sign with the Brisbane Broncos. Now, Kevin Walters is currently doing a season review of every player at the moment, and he's not looking to do any recruitment or retention strategies beyond this point in time. With that being said, he would be open to having someone like John Asiata, who could be like a good ball-playing lock, and someone that they can benefit off having in their side. So that's all the talk for the news around the NRL world. We're going to now talk about the things that's coming up, State of Origin, New South Wales versus Queensland. And as per the end of the grand final, the following players were added for New South Wales: Nathan Cleary, Stephen Crichton, Isaiah Yeo, Jerome Luai for the Penrith Panthers, and for the Melbourne Storm, Dale Finucane and Ryan Pappenhausen added to the New South Wales squad and finalised their squad there. And for the Queensland Maroons, Kurt Capewell was the only one from the Penrith Panthers added to that squad, and the rest were from Melbourne. Tino Fa'asua Malawi, Cameron Munster, Branko Lee, Christian Welch, and Patrick Kafusi, all added to the squad, Maroon squad, and will be playing a part in this year's State of Origin series. Now, the teams have been announced, but before I get into the teams, I'm going to just take a moment to discuss something that happened this week. Now, the NRL came out and tried to sack the Australian anthem from State of Origin. They saw that as an opportunity for the game to not have it for State of Origin. It'll continue in grand finals and it'll continue in international tests, but they looked to remove it from State of Origin. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we removing the Australian national anthem? I know that there's been a group lobbying with players such as Josh Adokar and Latrell Mitchell, and even led by Anthony Mundine, who believe that the Australian national anthem is racist to the Aboriginal community, and they want a change for it. But this is a problem I have. Now, we've got Peter V'landys, who has taken over, will be over just over a year since he's taken over the NRL, and he's always been about the fans and what the fans want, and always looking to accommodate the fans. And it's a fantastic way to look at things, and it's something that is really appreciated. And one of the successes from that is having the NRL go back to one referee. It hasn't been terrible. It's actually, the game's flowed a lot better, and it's been easier to flow. But that's just one of the positive changes he's made. But I don't understand why we'll keep it in a game such as a grand final between two local teams, but we won't have it on State of Origin. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, as I said, you've got a small campaign of people trying to lobby for it. But the problem I have with that is it's only been for the last 3 or 4 years. This lobbying hasn't started from back in the day. This is something that's only been recently brought up and brought to the NRL's attention. And they're trying to sack it from State of Origin, which I thought is an absolute no-go. If you're going to sack it from State of Origin, I genuinely believe that the NRL will looking to sack it from the grand final in the future. It's not going to be a matter of if, it's just going to be a matter of when. We're sacking our Australian national anthem, the anthem that we've had for as long as we can all remember. We're going to have it sacked for a minority group of those 4 people that want to kneel or not sing the Australian national anthem? Really? Why are we so focused on the minority instead of the majority? I don't understand it. And look, it took 15 to 20 minutes for Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, to get on the phone to Peter V'landys and say, mate, change that decision right now. Now, the decision had been discussed with the New South Wales Rugby League and the Queensland Rugby League. Now, Queensland Rugby League were all for it, said, yeah, we're happy to sack it. New South Wales Rugby League were very hesitant. And they mentioned that, you know what, look, we don't want to obviously cause any issues. If that's how the game wants to go, let it be that way. We don't believe that the Australian national anthem should be scrapped, and we should keep it as going. And that's a problem I have. I mean, we are so focused on trying to please every single person in the league. It's not going to happen. We can't please everyone. If you're going to be pleasing everyone, why are we bringing Israel Folau back to the NRL? Why is that the first thing that Peter V'landys is trying to do something for the fans? Why do we bring someone like Israel Folau back to the NRL? He made comments on something that he believes is right, and Peter V'landys came out in his first gig on the job and said, yeah, look, we're not bringing him back. He's not welcome back because he's not part of being inclusive. There's no consistency. If you're going to make some calls, be consistent. If you're going to be open to everyone, be open to everyone. Then don't have the national anthem. Then Australia will look to scrap that. Bring players that are back that have made mistakes in the past. For crying out loud, we have people that have bashed girls in our league. They have stalked girls. We've brought them back in the league. We can't bring a guy back from overseas who, as I said, who made a call of something on what they believe. Why are we doing the same thing to these guys? Josh Adokar and Latrell Mitchell don't believe that they should sing the national anthem. That's not being part of the majority. That's not being inclusive. Why are we telling them to go to Super League or go to Rugby Union or go play another sport? It's time that the NRL starts trying to focus and try to make every single person happy, because it's not going to work. And by the one thing you do, you want to get rid of the Australian national anthem. What? Because it's been racist for the last 3 years. Look, I don't know. I think it's a bad call. And I'm glad that the NRL went and changed the decision to not having it scrapped. This is our anthem. We've sung it for as long as we can remember. And I don't believe there is any change for it. As I said, this only started to happen in the last few years. This wasn't something that happened in recent times. This wasn't something that was been campaigning for the last 300, 400, 500 years. As far as I can remember, it's only been happening for the last 4 to 5 years. And it's been brought out and made a serious topic. So look, credit to the NRL. They weren't trying to make a political standpoint out of it, and I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe they didn't try and make it a political view and a political standpoint. No, there was no one having kind of a knife to their throat, so to say, to make a decision. They just thought they'd make a decision that would be best for the game, and it obviously backfired. And credit to them for coming out, and for the Prime Minister of Australia, credit to Scott Morrison for actually making some changes and getting on the phone and saying, no, in a year that we've had, we need to be together. And the Australian national anthem, being sung at games such as State of Origin, grand finals, international matches, needs to be sung. We need to be united. So, look, and unfortunately, this has kind of taken up most of the podcast, but it's something that needed to be said and needed to be ranted about, because if we're going to start focusing on the minority, then we need to let every Tom, Dick, and Harry back in the game for no matter what. All I'm saying is that we need to show some consistency and start allowing for real change to happen by being consistent with every single person. But look, let's get back to our focus to game 1. Next Wednesday night will be New South Wales versus Queensland, and the sides have been announced. Now, at fullback for New South Wales, we've got James Tedesco. On the wings, we have Daniel Tupou and Josh Addo-Carr. Now, Daniel Tupou getting back into the jersey for the first time in a few years. In the centres, you've got Jack Wyden and on debut, Clint Gutherson in the centres. In the halves, we've got Luke Keary making his debut in jersey number 6, and you've got Nathan Cleary backing up from last year's series in the halfback position. Now, we've got Daniel Saifidi and Junior Paulo also making his debut in the front row with Damien Cook at hooker. In the back row, the same. Boyd Cordner and Tyson Frizzell in the second row, and Jake Trbojevic over at lock. The interchange, we've got Cody Walker coming off the bench in jersey 14. Payne Haas, Cameron Murray, and Angus Crichton will be the 17. On the extended bench, they've named Cameron McInnes, Regan Campbell-Gillard, Nathan Brown, and Zach Lomax in jerseys 18 to 21. Now, my side looked a little bit similar. Originally, my side, I had Nick Kotrick over Daniel Tupou. I had Zach Lomax or Stephen Crichton over Clint Gutherson. I had Payne Haas starting and Daniel Saifidi off the bench. And I even had Nathan Brown in there and Dale Finucane in my side as well. So, look, it's not a bad side that New South Wales have named. As I said, Clint Gutherson, it will be interesting to see how he goes in the centres. It will be very, very interesting to see how he goes. He's got that decent ball-playing ability. We've seen that for him this year at Parramatta. If all he can do is just get that ball and give it to Josh Addo-Carr, then it's a very easy job for him to do. Apart from that, I don't mind the side. I'll put Payne Haas in the starting side over Daniel Saifidi and move Daniel Saifidi to the bench. I believe that Daniel Saifidi makes more of an impact off the bench than he would starting. And Payne Haas makes more of an impact starting than he would be off the bench. So I would make a couple of changes around like that, but that's the side that New South Wales have named. And Queensland have named their side as well. It's a very young side. A lot of debutants Wayne Bennett has gone with. So in fullback will be AJ Brimson from the Gold Coast Titans. On the wings, 19-year-old Xavier Coates and Philip Sammy. In the centres, Brent Curley and Dane Gagai. Now 4 of the 5 I've just mentioned are making their debuts for Queensland. So congratulations to them. In the halves, Cameron Munster and Daly Cherry Evans. Now Cameron Munster is going to be playing a little bit broken, suffering a knee injury in the final series. Now, the forward pack is Christian Welch, who has had a phenomenal season for Melbourne Storm, linking up at the front with Josh Papali, and the jersey number 9, Jake Friend, will get the starting gig for Queensland in the hooker role. Now, the second row locks, Cohen Hess, bit of a shock one. Cohen Hess and Felice Kafusi will be the starting second row, and at lock, starting in his debut, will be Tino Fa'asu-Malawi. On the bench, you've got Ben Hunt, you've got debutant Lindsay Collins, debutant Jaden Sewer, and Jai Arrow being the men on the bench. And on the extended bench, you've got Kurt Capewell, Moriaki Fotuaika, Dunamis Louis, and Harmel Hunt as cover for the lads in case anything was to go down. Now, in the Queensland side, it's a very young side. As I said, you've got AJ Brimson, who's 22, 23. You've got Xavier Coates, who's 19. You've got Philip Sammy, who's 22. There's a lot of inexperience there. If this is the side I was picking, I would keep Brenko Lee in the centres, definitely. I'll put Moriaki Fotuaika on the bench, or even have him start at lock, and Tino Fa'asu-Malawi coming off the bench. And I would have put Harry Grant in at 9 as opposed to Jake Friend. I believe that Jake Friend's best days are behind him. He has played a tough 11, 12 years in the NRL, and his body is quite broken. For my tip, I'm a born and bred New South Welshman, so I'm going to be going New South Wales. I'm going to say New South Wales by 12. While obviously our side is a lot more experienced than the Queensland side, it's not time to underestimate Wayne Bennett and Mal Meninga. They're only getting their team prepped and ready the best way they can. And I believe with that being said, I do think that New South Wales will take out the series this year. and we'll obviously have that down packed for yous. And New South Wales win that game by 12 points. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on League Chat with the Stat. Once again, as you know, we are all over social media platforms in Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we are all over our podcasting streams with Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Alexa, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. You can catch us all on there and Spotify as well. Now, another thing to be said as well, if you have any questions or you want to send through some information or something that you might see that you want to send us during the week, send it through leaguechatwiththestat@gmail.com. Just in the bottom here, leaguechatwiththestat@gmail.com to send through all of that information through. And as I said, we thank you for your support. Now, we're going to be joined next week by a special guest just going to cover Game 1 of the State of Origin series. So be in tune for that. He's a familiar face to the show, so it's time to get excited for that, guys. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. You have yourselves a good week. Go the Mighty Blues, and we'll see you back same time next week. Take care. See you later.